The medical transport ship drifted through space like a wounded bird. Inside, Nurse Sarah-chan checked on her patients one more time. 20 years of working in Earth's frontier hospitals had taught her to stay calm in any situation. But nothing had prepared her for this. The attack came without warning. Blue energy beams tore through the ship's hull. Alarm screamed. Sarah grabbed the emergency medical kit and rushed to help the injured crew members. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, applying pressure to wounds and administering pain relief. "Everyone stay calm," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. The ship shuddered as something latched onto the hull. Sarah heard the terrible sound of metal tearing. Through the smoke and sparks, she saw them, the Kurthani Raiders. They stood 8 feet tall, their purple skin glistening under the emergency lights. Each warrior wore elaborate armor, decorated with the bones of their enemies. The Kurthani were known throughout the galaxy as the most brutal species. They considered themselves the elite warriors of the universe. Other species trembled at the mention of their name. They had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved countless beings. Humans, one of them spat, his voice dripping with disgust. "Weak, soft creatures. Take them." Sarah watched as the aliens rounded up the crew. Captain Martinez tried to resist, but a single blow from a Kurthani fist sent him crashing into the wall. The alien warriors laughed, a harsh sound like grinding metal. "This one is a healer," another Kurthani said, pointing at Sarah's medical uniform. "The slave markets pay well for healers." Sarah kept her face neutral as they bound her hands with energy shackles. She had heard stories about the Kurthani slave markets. Beings from across the galaxy were bought and sold like cattle. The lucky ones died quickly. They herded the survivors into the Kurthani ship. Sarah counted 15 crew members still alive. Some were badly injured. She wanted to help them, but the shackles prevented her from moving freely. The Kurthani ship was a fortress of metal and cruelty. The walls were lined with trophies, weapons, flags, and worse things taken from conquered species. Sarah saw a human skull mounted on the wall and forced herself to look away. "You will fetch a good price," the lead Kurthani told her. His name was Commander Thrax, and he wore more decorations than the others. "Humans are popular as servants. You are weak, but clever enough to follow orders." Sarah said nothing. She had learned long ago that sometimes silence was the best defense. She observed everything, the layout of the ship, the number of guards, the location of weapons. Her mind cataloged every detail. They threw the prisoners into a large cell. The energy bars hummed with deadly force. Anyone who touched them will be vaporized instantly. Sarah immediately went to work, checking on the injured crew members with their limited mobility. "What are we going to do?" whispered Ensign Torres, a young communications officer on his first deep space assignment. His face was pale with fear. "We survive," Sarah said simply. "And we wait for an opportunity." Commander Thrax watched them through the bars, amused. "Look at the human healer, still trying to help others. Such a waste of effort. In the slave markets, compassion is beaten out of you quickly." The other Kurthani laughed. They saw humans as nothing more than animals. Weak creatures who had only recently achieved space travel. Earth's military was a joke compared to the Kurthani fleet. Humans had no natural weapons, no claws, no armor, no poison. Just soft skin and fragile bones. Sarah continued her work, ignoring their mockery. She had dealt with arrogant doctors and dismissive administrators her entire career. Alien warriors were just another type of bully, and she had learned how to handle bullies. As she worked, she noticed something. The Kurthani had made a mistake. They had searched the crew for weapons, but ignored her medical kit. To them, healing tools were not dangerous. They didn't understand that in the right hands, anything could be a weapon. Night fell on the ship, or what passed for night in deep space. The Kurthani reduced the lighting to save power. Most of the guards went to their quarters, leaving only a skeleton crew to watch the prisoners. Sarah waited until the other prisoners were asleep. Then, she carefully opened her medical kit. Inside were bandages, medications, and surgical tools. But there were also other things. Things that most beings wouldn't recognize as dangerous. She pulled out a small vial of clear liquid. To anyone watching, it looked like saline solution. But it was actually a powerful anesthetic, concentrated enough to drop a creature twice her size. Another vial contained adrenaline, a human hormone that could give someone superhuman strength for a short time. The Korthani didn't know about human chemistry. They didn't understand how a species without natural weapons had survived and thrived. They had never heard the stories of human mothers lifting cars to save their children. They didn't know about the soldiers who kept fighting even after taking wounds that would kill other species. Humans were not weak. They were adaptive. They were creative. And they were dangerous when cornered. Sarah heard footsteps approaching. She quickly hid the vials and pretended to be asleep. A young Korthani guard peered into the cell. He looked bored, probably assigned to the night shift as punishment for some minor infraction. Pathetic creatures, he muttered. I don't know why we bother taking them alive. Sarah memorized his face. He will be the first. Young, inexperienced, overconfident. He thought the prisoners were helpless. He was wrong. The ship continued its journey toward the slave markets. The Korthani celebrated their successful raid, drinking and boasting about their prowess. They had no idea that in the cell below, a human nurse was planning their downfall. Sarah had spent years in emergency rooms, making split-second decisions that meant life or death. She had performed surgery in war zones with bombs falling around her. She had faced disease outbreaks that killed thousands. The Korthani thought she was just a healer. They were about to learn that human healers knew more about taking bodies apart than most warriors. As the ship flew through the darkness of space, Sarah Chun prepared for war, not with weapons or strength, but with knowledge, patience, and the fierce determination that had allowed humans to survive everything the universe threw at them. The Korthani elite had made a fatal error. They had captured a human nurse and thought she was helpless. They were about to discover why humans had a saying, "First, do no harm." It was a promise healers made, but it was also a warning, because someone who knew how to heal knew exactly how to hurt. Sarah closed her eyes and waited. The game had begun. 3 days passed in the cold cell. Sarah maintained her routine, caring for the injured crew members and observing the Korthani patterns. The aliens had grown comfortable, believing their prisoners were broken. They didn't notice Sarah counting their numbers, memorizing their schedules, or studying their biology during medical checks. The young guard she had identified earlier, his name was Kor, had developed a cruel habit. Every night, he would bang on the energy bars to wake the prisoners, laughing at their startled reactions. He especially enjoyed tormenting Sarah, calling her the helpless healer in his guttural language. On the 4th night, Sarah was ready. She had discovered something crucial during her observations. The Korthani, despite their fearsome appearance, had a significant weakness. Their purple skin, which looked so tough, was actually highly sensitive to certain compounds. Their home world had no insects, no poisonous plants. They had never developed resistance to many substances that humans encounter daily. When Kor approached for his nightly harassment, Sarah was sitting near the bars, seemingly absorbed in checking a crew member's bandages. The guard started his usual routine, raising his armored fist to bang on the energy field. "Time to wake up! Weak humans!" he shouted. Sarah moved faster than he expected. Her hand darted through the bars. The energy field was designed to stop escape attempts, not small movements. She pressed a small adhesive patch against his exposed neck, the one spot his armor didn't cover. Kor laughed. "What was that supposed to do, healer?" "Heal me to death." Sarah stepped back and began counting. 5, 4, 3, 2. The guard's laugh died in his throat. His eyes widened as his muscles began to spasm. The patch contained a concentrated dose of capsaicin, the compound that made peppers hot. To humans, it was a mild irritant. To the Korthani, with their sensitive skin, it was like being set on fire. Kor crashed to the ground, his body convulsing. His screams brought other guards running. They found him writhing on the floor, his skin around the patch turning an angry orange color. "What did you do?" demanded the senior guard, pointing his weapon at Sarah. "I provided medical assistance," Sarah said calmly. He seemed to be having a reaction. Perhaps an allergy? The senior guard looked suspicious, but couldn't prove anything. They carried Kor to their medical bay, where their healer, an elderly Korthani who had never seen anything like this, struggled to treat him. Word of the incident spread through the ship. Commander Thrax himself came to interrogate Sarah. He stood outside the cell, his 4 eyes studying her with new interest. "You did something to my guard," he said. It wasn't a question. "I'm a healer," Sarah replied. "I help people. Though I must say, your species seems to have some unusual medical conditions. Has anyone ever told you that your skin chemistry is quite unique? Thrax's eyes narrowed. He was beginning to suspect that this human was not as helpless as she appeared. But his pride wouldn't let him admit that a mere human had outsmarted one of his warriors. Double the guards, he ordered, and no one is to go near the bars. Sarah had expected this. Phase 1 was complete. She had shown them she could reach them, even from inside a cell. Now they would be more cautious, but also more afraid. Fear was a weapon as powerful as any blade. Over the next 2 days, strange things began happening on the ship. Guards reported feeling dizzy after walking past the cell. 2 warriors collapsed during their shifts, overcome by mysterious weakness. The ship's life support systems began malfunctioning in specific areas. The Korthani couldn't understand what was happening. Their medical scans showed nothing wrong. Their healers were baffled. They didn't realize that Sarah had been releasing carefully measured doses of various compounds into the air, harmless to humans, but devastating to Korthani physiology. She had turned their ship into a medical minefield. Every breath they took near the human prisoners made them weaker. The iron supplements she had dissolved in the water condensation affected their copper-based blood. The antibiotics she had aerosolized attacked the beneficial bacteria their digestive systems needed. Commander Thrax was furious, but also worried. His elite warriors were falling ill, and he couldn't explain why. The humans, meanwhile, seemed unaffected. If anything, they appeared to be getting stronger. This was Sarah's second discovery. The Korthani fed their prisoners a basic nutrient paste, thinking all species needed the same sustenance. But human bodies were incredibly adaptive. While the paste barely sustained other species, humans could extract every possible calorie and vitamin from it. The crew was actually becoming healthier under the sparse diet. On the 7th day, Sarah made her move. The guard rotation had been disrupted by so many warriors falling ill. During a shift change, there was a 5-minute window when only one guard watched the prisoners, an older Korthani named Drax who had been pulled from kitchen duty. Sarah had been saving the adrenaline shot for this moment. She injected it into her thigh, feeling the hormone flood her system. Her heart rate tripled. Time seemed to slow down. Every muscle in her body tensed with explosive power. "Guard," she called out. "One of the prisoners is dying." Drax hurried over, concerned about losing valuable merchandise. The moment he deactivated a section of the energy bars to check, Sarah struck. The adrenaline gave her strength that surprised even her. She grabbed Drax's arm and pulled him forward with enough force to slam his head against the cell frame. As he stumbled, she pressed another patch against his neck, this one containing a concentrated anesthetic that would knock out an elephant. Drax collapsed instantly. Sarah grabbed his weapon and access codes before the energy bars reactivated. She had maybe 3 minutes before the adrenaline wore off, and her body crashed. "Everyone up," she commanded. "We're leaving. Now." The crew, inspired by their nurse's actions, jumped to their feet. Sarah used Drax's codes to deactivate the cell. They poured out, following her lead. Captain Martinez, despite his injuries, grinned fiercely. "I knew you were planning something, Chun. What's the play?" "The medical bay first," Sarah said, already moving. "Then, the communication array. We need to send a distress signal before they realize what's happening." They moved through the ship like ghosts. Sarah's knowledge of the Korthani's biological weaknesses had given them an incredible advantage. She had placed patches and compounds throughout the ship during her medical emergencies over the past week. Now, as they passed, she activated them. Korthani warriors stumbled out of rooms, disoriented and weak. Their nervous systems, evolved for their specific planet, couldn't handle the cocktail of human compounds Sarah had introduced. She wasn't killing them. She was a healer, after all. But she was certainly making them wish they were dead. The medical bay was their first stop. Sarah rated it with the efficiency of someone who had performed triage in war zones. She grabbed stimulants for the crew, more compounds to use against the Korthani, and, most importantly, their medical database. "Why do we need that?" Torres asked. Sarah smiled grimly. "Know your enemy. Their medical records show every weakness, every allergy, every genetic flaw. To heal effectively, you must understand how bodies break. And I'm very good at understanding." As they moved toward the communication array, alarms began blaring. The Korthani had discovered the escape. Sarah could hear Commander Thrax roaring orders, his voice filled with rage and disbelief. Find them. Elite warriors do not lose to human scum. But his elite warriors were in no condition to fight. Half were unconscious, others were vomiting uncontrollably, and the rest were too dizzy to walk straight. Sarah's biological warfare had reduced the feared Corthani raiders to stumbling invalids. The communication array was guarded by two warriors who were still functional. They raised their weapons as the humans approached. Sarah stepped forward, holding up her medical kit. "I can help your comrades," she said. "They're dying. Your healer doesn't understand human biochemistry. Let me pass and I'll save them." The guards hesitated. They had seen their fellow warriors fall mysteriously. Their own healer was unconscious, overcome by the same ailments. This human had caused it, but she might also be the only one who could fix it. "You expect us to trust you?" one guard snarled. Sarah shrugged. "You can trust me, or you can explain to your families why the entire crew died from something as simple as pepper spray and antibiotics. Your choice." The psychological warfare worked. The guards, afraid and confused, lowered their weapons slightly. It was all the opening Sarah needed. She threw 2 vials at their feet. The glass shattered, releasing a cloud of concentrated ammonia. To humans, it was unpleasant. To the Corthani, with their sensitive respiratory systems, it was like inhaling fire. The guards collapsed, gasping. The humans rushed past them into the communication room. Captain Martinez immediately began working on the equipment while Sarah sealed the door behind them. "How long do we have?" Martinez asked. "Maybe 10 minutes before they recover enough to mount an assault," Sarah replied. She was already feeling the adrenaline crash, her body shaking from the exertion. "That's enough." Martinez's fingers flew over the alien controls. Years of studying Xenotech paid off as he accessed the communication systems. "Getting a signal out now. All frequencies. Someone will hear us." Sarah turned to the crew. "Barricade everything. Use whatever you can find. We hold this room until help arrives." As they worked, she heard Commander Thrax outside, his voice hoarse but determined. "Human healer, you think you've won? You've only delayed your fate. We are the elite. We are the strongest." Sarah activated the intercom. "Commander, you made 2 mistakes. First, you assumed healing and harming were different skills. They're not. They're 2 sides of the same knowledge. And the second," Thrax demanded, "you thought humans were weak because we don't have claws or armor. But we survived on a planet that tried to kill us every day. We ate poisonous plants until they became spices. We domesticated predators and made them pets. We turned diseases into vaccines. Humans aren't weak, Commander. We're the species that weaponizes everything, including medicine." The sound of Corthani boots echoed in the corridor. The final battle was coming. Sarah loaded her last syringe with a cocktail of stimulants and painkillers. If she was going down, she would go down fighting. But she had already won the most important victory. She had shown the galaxy that humans were not helpless, that a single nurse with a medical kit could bring down a ship full of elite warriors. The Corthani thought they had captured a helpless healer. Instead, they had trapped themselves with humanity's most dangerous predator, someone who understood life so well that they knew exactly how to dismantle it. As the door began to buckle under the assault, Sarah smiled. The distress signal was transmitting. Help would come, and the story of the human nurse who defeated the Corthani elite would spread across the stars, a warning to any who thought humans were easy prey. The battle wasn't over, but the war had already been won. The communication room door exploded inward. Commander Thrax stood in the opening, his purple skin mottled with orange patches from chemical burns. His ornate armor was tarnished, and his 4 eyes blazed with fury. Behind him, 6 warriors stumbled forward, the only ones still able to fight. "Surrender, human," Thrax snarled. "You played your tricks. But tricks won't save you from Corthani steel." Sarah stood in front of her crew, medical kit in one hand, a captured energy pistol in the other. The adrenaline crash had left her exhausted, but she kept her voice steady. "I've taken down 14 of your warriors with nothing but medical supplies. Do you really want to test me when I have a weapon?" Thrax laughed, a harsh sound like grinding metal. "You think you understand combat, healer? I have conquered worlds. I have killed champions of dozen species. You are nothing but a soft human who got lucky. Lucky. Sarah's lips curved in a dangerous smile. Let me tell you about luck, Commander. Lucky is being born on a planet where everything evolves to kill you. Lucky is developing medicine on a world with thousands of diseases. Lucky is that your species never faced real biological warfare until today. She reached into her kit and pulled out a small inhaler. This contains concentrated histamine. Humans use it to treat allergic reactions. But I modified it. One spray, and your respiratory system will shut down in seconds. Still think I'm just lucky? The Korthani warriors hesitated. They had seen too many of their comrades fall to this human's chemical weapons. Their confidence, built on centuries of physical dominance, was cracking. Thrax sensed their fear and roared. She's bluffing. She's a healer. She won't kill. It's against their weak human ethics. You're right, Sarah admitted. I'm a healer. I've sworn to do no harm. But you know what? Sometimes the best way to save lives is to end a threat. And you, Commander, are a threat to every innocent being on those slave markets. The standoff stretched taut. Sarah could see Martinez from the corner of her eye, still working on the communications. They needed more time. The distress signal was broadcasting, but help could be hours or days away. Tell me, Commander, Sarah said, buying precious seconds. How many species have you enslaved? How many families have you torn apart? Hundreds, Thrax boasted. The weak serve the strong. It is the way of the universe. Then explain this. Sarah gestured to the fallen warriors. If you're so strong, why are your elite warriors defeated by a single human with a medical degree? Thrax's face contorted with rage. Enough talk. He charged, moving faster than Sarah expected. She fired the energy pistol, but the shot went wide. Thrax's massive fist caught her in the stomach, sending her flying across the room. The medical kit scattered, vials and instruments clattering across the floor. Pain exploded through Sarah's body. She tasted blood. Through blurred vision, she saw Thrax advancing, his warriors spreading out to surround the human crew. You see, Thrax stood over her. When it comes to real combat, humans break like all the others. Sarah coughed, blood speckling her lips. You're right. In a straight fight, you'd win every time. She managed a painful smile. Good thing I don't fight fair. Thrax noticed the broken vials around them too late. The chemicals Sarah had been carrying were mixing on the floor, creating a toxic cloud that rose rapidly. The commander's eyes widened as the fumes hit his sensitive respiratory system. What? He staggered backward, gasping. Chlorine gas, Sarah wheezed, pulling an oxygen mask from her scattered supplies. Basic chemistry. Humans used it as a weapon over a century ago. We developed countermeasures. You didn't. The Korthani warriors retreated, choking on the toxic fumes. Their advanced armor was useless against the gas that attacked their lungs from the inside. Several collapsed immediately, their purple skin turning a sickly gray. Masks on, Sarah shouted to her crew. They had practiced this. Every human who worked in space knew basic chemical safety. They pulled emergency masks from their suits while the Korthani suffocated on their own arrogance. Thrax stumbled toward the door, his mighty strength useless against an invisible enemy. Sarah forced herself to stand, ribs screaming in protest. She couldn't let him escape. He would vent the room, killing her crew. She grabbed a syringe from the floor, one of her last resort weapons. It contained a concentrated dose of potassium. In small amounts, it was essential for life. In large doses, it stopped hearts. Thrax was on his knees when she reached him, his body fighting for every breath. His four eyes looked at her with something she hadn't seen before, fear. Please, he gasped. Mercy. Sarah knelt beside him, syringe in hand. Like the mercy you showed your slaves? Like the mercy you showed the families you destroyed? I surrender. My ship, my crew, yours. Sarah studied him. This monster had caused untold suffering. He deserved death. But she was a healer. She saved lives, even unworthy ones. You'll live, she decided, injecting him with a sedative instead. But your days of slavery are over. The gas began to dissipate as the ship's ventilation system worked overtime. Sarah surveyed the communication room. 7 Korthani warriors lay unconscious. Her crew was shaken but alive. And, most importantly, the distress beacon was still transmitting. Chun, you beautiful genius, Captain Martinez said, his voice muffled by his mask. Remind me never to make you angry. Sarah managed a weak laugh. I'm a nurse, Captain. We're always angry. We just hide it better. Over the next hour, they secure the ship. The remaining Korthani, weakened by days of biological assault, surrendered without a fight. They had never imagined that their greatest weakness would be their biology, or that a healer would be their downfall. Sarah established a makeshift medical bay, treating both human and Korthani injuries. She was a healer first, warrior second. Even Thrax received treatment, though she kept him heavily sedated. Why help them? Torres asked, watching her tend to a young Korthani warrior. After everything they did, because that's what separates us from them, Sarah replied. They see compassion as weakness. We know it's strength. Besides, they'll stand trial for their crimes. Death would be too easy. 3 days later, help arrived. Not just one ship, but an entire human fleet. The news of a single nurse defeating a Korthani raider crew had spread like wildfire. Ships had come from across human space, eager to assist. Admiral Jessica Wong personally boarded the Korthani vessel, her expression mixing amazement and respect as she surveyed the scene. Elite warriors lay in medical beds, tended by the same human they had tried to enslave. Nurse Chun, the admiral said, the reports don't do justice to what you've accomplished. You've not only saved your crew, but struck a blow against the slave trade itself. Sarah, exhausted beyond measure, simply shrugged. I did what any nurse would do, Admiral. I identified a problem and treated it. The Korthani were a disease. I was the cure. The Admiral studied the chemical burns, the makeshift medical equipment, the defeated warriors. Remind me to increase funding for our medical corps. If one nurse can do this, imagine what a full medical battalion could accomplish. As they transferred to the human ships, Sarah took one last look at the Korthani vessel. Commander Thrax was conscious now, watching her from his restraints. His 4 eyes held a mix of fear and respect. Human, he called out. What are you? Sarah paused at the doorway. I'm a healer. I preserve life. But I also understand death more intimately than any warrior. I know exactly how much pressure stops a heart, which chemicals shut down organs, how to turn a body's own systems against itself. Warriors train to fight. Healers train to understand the very essence of life and death. I thought healers were weak, Thrax admitted. That was your first mistake, Sarah said. Your second was forgetting that humans are persistence predators. We don't win through strength or speed. We win by understanding our prey better than they understand themselves. And thanks to your medical database, I now understand Korthani biology very, very well. The implications hit Thrax like a physical blow. Not only had this human defeated his crew, but she had gained the knowledge to defeat any Korthani. The slave raids would end. His species' advantage was gone. What happens now? He asked, his voice small. Now you face justice, Sarah said. And the galaxy learns that humans are not prey. We're the species that turns healers into weapons, that makes medicine from poison, that thrives on a death world. We're the ones who look at impossible odds and ask, is that all? She left him with those words, walking away from the ship that had been meant to carry her to slavery. The story would spread across the galaxy. The human nurse who brought down the elite Korthani with nothing but medical knowledge and determination. But Sarah was already thinking ahead. The slave markets still existed. Other species still suffered. She had proven that one human could make a difference. Now it was time to see what humanity united could do. The hunter had become the hunted. The weak had overcome the strong. And a healer had shown the galaxy that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room was the one who understood life well enough to take it apart. As the human fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying news of the victory to every corner of human space, Sarah finally allowed herself to rest. But even in sleep, she smiled. The Korthani had thought her helpless. They had learned better, and they would not be the last. The Galactic Council chambers had never seen such an uproar. Representatives from 50 different species filled the massive amphitheater, their voices creating a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and growls. At the center of it all stood Sarah Chun, still wearing her medical uniform, now decorated with both human military honors and alien symbols of respect. 3 months had passed since the Korthani incident. The story had spread beyond human space, reaching every corner of the galaxy. The slave traders were nervous. Their victims were hopeful, and the Galactic Council was in chaos. This is unprecedented, screeched Ambassador Viktok of the Altarian Empire. His mantis-like head swiveled towards Sarah. A single human defeated an entire Corthani crew? Impossible. The evidence is clear, rumbled Ambassador Stone, Earth's representative. He was a mountain of a man who had fought in the colonial wars. We have the ship, the crew, and the testimony of 15 human survivors. Nurse Chin did exactly what we claim. But with medicine, Viktok's wings buzzed in agitation. She turned healing into warfare. This violates every principle of civilized combat. Sarah stepped forward to the speaking platform. The room fell silent. Even through universal translators, they could sense the steel in her voice. Ambassador Viktok, your empire has profited from the slave trade for centuries. You speak of civilized combat while beings are bought and sold like property. You want to talk about violations? Let's talk about the violations of basic sentient rights. The strong dominate the weak, interrupted Kraxel, a serpentine representative from a slaver coalition. It has always been thus. Humans are newcomers to space. You do not understand the natural order. Sarah pulled out a small tablet. I've been studying the natural order you speak of. Do you know what I found? The slave trade isn't about strength. It's about exploitation. The Corthani weren't strong. They just had better weapons and targeted isolated colonies. She tapped the tablet, and holographic images filled the chamber. Pictures of slave markets, of beings in chains, of families torn apart. The comfortable representatives shifted uneasily in their seats. I also studied the biology of every slaving species, Sarah continued. Would you like to know what I learned? The slavers' representatives suddenly looked nervous. They had all heard what she did to the Corthani. Every species here has biological vulnerabilities, Sarah said calmly. The Altarians can't process certain proteins. The Nexari are allergic to compounds found in human hair. The Vronak can be paralyzed by frequencies human children use in toys. Is that a threat? Kraxel hissed, his scales changing color in alarm. It's a medical assessment, Sarah replied. I'm a healer. I catalog weaknesses to provide better treatment. But the interesting thing about human medicine is that we've weaponized it before. We turn mold into antibiotics to fight bacteria. We use radiation to kill cancer. We inject controlled diseases to build immunity. She paused, letting the implications sink in. Humans don't see healing and harming as opposites. We see them as tools to be used as needed. And right now, the galaxy has a disease called slavery. I intend to cure it. You're one human, shouted a Corthani representative, one of the few free traders who hadn't been connected to the raids. What can one human do against the combined might of the slave trade? Sarah smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. I'm not one human. I'm one human with knowledge. Do you know what happened after I defeated Commander Thrax? Earth's Medical Corps requested my report. All of it. Every biological weakness, every chemical compound, every tactical observation. The human section of the council shifted, and dozens of beings in medical uniforms stood up. Doctors, nurses, combat medics, xenobiologists. They had come from across human space. Meet the Human Medical Warfare Division, Admiral Wong announced. Established 2 months ago. Trained in Nurse Chen's techniques. Ready to deploy anywhere in the galaxy where slavery exists. The chamber erupted. Slavers shouted in outrage. Their victims cheered. The neutral parties called for order. Through it all, Sarah stood calm in the center of the storm. You can't. Viktok screeched. The council forbids biological warfare. We're not talking about weapons, Sarah said mildly. We're talking about medical interventions. If slavers happen to be allergic to our treatments, well, that's an unfortunate side effect. Perhaps they should seek different employment. This is madness. Kraxel rose to his full height, towering over the human section. You humans think you can change millennia of tradition with your tricks? We will crush you. Like the Corthani try to crush me? Sarah asked. How did that work out for them? She gestured to a section of the chamber where Commander Thrax sat in chains, awaiting trial. The once mighty warrior flinched when her gaze fell on him. His testimony had been damning, revealing the full extent of the slave network. Here's what's going to happen, Sarah announced. The Human Medical Corps is offering our services to any species suffering under slavery. We'll provide medical aid, defensive training, and biological countermeasures against slavers. Free of charge. And if we try to stop you, growled a Vronak warlord. Sarah's smile widened. Then, You'll discover why humans are the only species that turned healing into a martial art. We call it aggressive medicine. Would you like a demonstration? The warlord stepped back involuntarily. The stories of the Korthani ship had spread. Warriors found unconscious, their own biology turned against them. Elite fighters reduced to invalids by a single nurse with a medical kit. Ambassador Stone stood beside Sarah. Earth stand with Nurse Chun. Any attack on our medical personnel will be considered an act of war. And, unlike other species, we don't just fight with weapons. We fight with knowledge. The vote, someone called. Call the vote. The council had been debating a resolution to officially condemn slavery. For years, it had been blocked by the powerful slaver coalitions. But now, with humans offering protection to anyone who voted yes, the dynamics had changed. The vote was called. One by one, species that had remained neutral out of fear voted to condemn slavery. The medical corps, standing behind Sarah, was a visible reminder that they no longer stood alone. When the final tally came in, the resolution passed by a landslide. "This isn't over," Craxel hissed as he slithered past Sarah. "You've made enemies today, human. Powerful enemies." "Good," Sarah replied. "I'm a nurse. I'm used to fighting diseases that don't want to be cured." As the slavers stormed out of the chamber, other representatives approached. A small, fuzzy being from a species often targeted by raiders touched Sarah's hand with a trembling paw. "Thank you," she whispered. "My daughter was taken 3 years ago. I never thought, never hoped." "We'll find her," Sarah promised. The medical corps doesn't just fight. We heal. We search. We reunite families. That's what humans do. Over the following days, the Human Medical Warfare Division deployed across the galaxy. They set up clinics on vulnerable worlds, teaching locals how to create biological defenses. They developed species-specific compounds that would incapacitate slavers, but leave the innocent unharmed. Sarah herself led a strike team to a major slave market. Using the techniques she had perfected on the Korthani ship, they disabled the guards without killing anyone. The slaves were freed, families reunited, and the slavers arrested to face trial. But the real victory came in the message it sent. Humans weren't conquerors. They weren't trying to build an empire. They were healers, teachers, protectors. They shared their knowledge freely, empowering others to defend themselves. "Why?" a freed slave asked Sarah as she treated his wounds. He was from a species that had been enslaved for generations. "Why do humans care about us?" Sarah finished bandaging his injuries before answering. "Because we've been the underdog. On our planet, we weren't the strongest or fastest. We survived by caring for each other, by turning our weaknesses into strengths. We know what it's like to be prey, and we decided that no one else should have to feel that way." The revolution spread like wildfire. Species that had been victims for centuries learned they could fight back. Not with strength, but with knowledge. The slavers, used to dealing with traditional warfare, couldn't adapt to an enemy that attacked their biology rather than their ships. Within a year, the slave trade had collapsed. Markets shut down as guards refused to risk exposure to human-trained medical defenders. Raiding parties found their targets equipped with biological weapons specifically designed to target their species. The mighty slaver fleets were reduced to fleeing from beings they had once hunted. Sarah stood on the observation deck of the medical ship Nightingale, watching as another freed slave transport headed home. Captain Martinez joined her, now serving as her military liaison. "You started something incredible," he said. "The galaxy will never be the same." "I didn't start anything," Sarah corrected. "I just showed them what humans already knew. That healers are the most dangerous warriors because we understand life at its most fundamental level. That compassion isn't weakness. It's the greatest strength there is." "What's next?" Martinez asked. "The slavers are beaten, but there are other problems in the galaxy." Sarah smiled, the expression holding both warmth and warning. "Wherever beings suffer, wherever the strong prey on the weak, wherever someone thinks humans are helpless, that's where we'll be. With our medical kits, and our knowledge, and our absolute refusal to accept that might makes right." She turned from the window, her nurse's uniform bearing the new insignia of the Medical Warfare Division, a caduceus wrapped in a shield, healing, and protection united. "We're not conquerors, Captain. We're not empire builders. We're humans. We're the species that looks at impossible odds and asks, 'How can I help?' We're the ones who turn medicine into miracles and miracles into revolutions. As the Nightingale prepared to jump to its next destination, Sarah Chun allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The Korthani had thought her helpless. The slavers had thought humans weak. The galaxy had thought compassion was a liability. They had all learned better, and the revolution was just beginning. 10 years had passed since a human nurse brought down a ship of elite warriors with nothing but medical knowledge. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Sarah Chun stood before the newly constructed Galactic Medical Academy, its towering spires reaching toward the stars from the neutral world of Haven. The academy was her dream made real, a place where beings from every species could learn the dual nature of healing, how to save lives, and, when necessary, how to stop those who would take them. The building itself was a monument to cooperation, incorporating architectural elements from 50 different worlds. Nervous, asked her companion, a tall figure in ceremonial robes. Sarah turned to face Commander Thrax. The former slaver had served 5 years in rehabilitation before dedicating his life to making amends. His 4 eyes, once filled with arrogance, now held wisdom and regret. He served as the Academy's head of security, using his warrior knowledge to protect those he had once hunted. A little, Sarah admitted. Speaking to a few dozen prisoners is one thing. Addressing thousands of future medical warriors is another. You changed my life, Thrax said simply. You showed me that strength without compassion is just brutality. These students need to hear your story. The real story, not the legend it's become. Sarah nodded and walked toward the main auditorium. Along the way, she passed memorial walls inscribed with names, slaves who had died before the revolution could save them, medical corps members who had given their lives defending the innocent. She touched each panel briefly, a ritual of remembrance. The auditorium was packed. 3,000 beings from across the galaxy filled the seats. Some were from species that had been slaves for generations. Others were from former slaver races, seeking redemption through healing. All wore the simple white uniform of medical students, equals in their pursuit of knowledge. Sarah took the podium, and silence fell like a blanket. Even after all these years, her presence commanded attention. She was no longer the young nurse captured by raiders. Her hair had threads of silver. Her face bore lines from years of difficult decisions. But her eyes still held the same fierce compassion that had toppled empires. "Welcome to your first day," she began. "I'm supposed to give you an inspirational speech about the noble calling of medical warfare. Instead, I'm going to tell you the truth. What we do is ugly, necessary, and heartbreaking. You'll save lives. You'll also end them. You'll heal wounds and inflict them. You'll be asked to make impossible choices with incomplete information." She paused, scanning the crowd. "Raise your hand if you're here because you want to be heroes." About half the students raised their hands, mostly the younger ones. Sarah smiled sadly. Heroes are what they call us afterward, when the blood is cleaned up and the reports are filed. In the moment, you'll feel like anything but a hero. You'll feel like a fraud, a killer, a person desperately trying to hold on to their humanity while doing inhuman things. A student in the front row, a young human woman who reminded Sarah of herself decades ago, raised her hand. Then why do it? Why teach us to turn healing into warfare? Because the alternative is worse, Sarah said. Let me tell you what really happened on that Korthani ship. Not the sanitized version you've heard. She pulled up a holographic display, showing images from that fateful journey. I poisoned beings who were just following orders. I used chemical weapons that caused excruciating pain. I exploited biological weaknesses that evolution never prepared them for. I turned their own bodies against them in ways that still give me nightmares. The students shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the heroic tale they had expected. But, Sarah continued, those beings I poisoned were taking us to slave markets. That pain I caused prevented the agony of families being torn apart. Those biological weapons stopped raiders who had destroyed entire colonies. Every terrible thing I did prevented something worse. She clicked to the next image. Freed slaves reuniting with their families. This is why we do it. Not for glory or heroism, but because someone has to stand between the predators and the prey. Someone has to be willing to get their hands dirty so others can keep theirs clean. My species does understand, said a crystalline being from the back. We are pacifists. Violence is antithetical to our nature. Yet I am here. How do I reconcile this? Sarah's expression softened. By remembering that we're not warriors. We're healers who have learned to fight. Every technique you'll learn here has a medical purpose first. The combat applications are secondary. We study biology to save lives. Sometimes, saving lives means stopping those who would take them. She moved to the next part of her presentation, the current state of the galaxy. The slave trade is gone, but new threats have emerged. Pirates using biological weapons they don't understand. Terrorist groups targeting medical facilities. Governments experimenting with weaponized diseases. The knowledge we spread to free the galaxy has also created new dangers. That's why this academy exists, she continued. Not to create super soldiers, but to train healers who can respond to these threats. You'll learn traditional medicine from the best doctors in the galaxy. You'll also learn how to detect biological weapons, create antidotes under fire, and yes, how to incapacitate enemies without killing them. What about killing? Asked another student, a former slave whose scars were still visible. Sometimes non-lethal isn't enough. Sarah met his gaze steadily. Then you make that choice and live with it. I've killed 17 beings in my career. I remember every name, every face, every moment I decided that ending their life was the only way to save others. It never gets easier. It shouldn't. The day it becomes easy is the day you stop being a healer and become just another killer. Thrax stepped forward, adding his perspective. I was one of those predators. I believed might made right, that the weak existed to serve the strong. Nurse Chen could have killed me and been justified. Instead, she showed mercy. That mercy led to my redemption and, to me, training thousands of your predecessors in defensive tactics. Sometimes the greatest victory is turning an enemy into an ally. But sometimes, Sarah added, mercy is a luxury you can't afford. You'll learn to make that judgment call. You'll probably get it wrong sometimes. That's why we work in teams, why we have oversight, why we never stop questioning ourselves. She pulled up a final image, the Medical Warfare Division symbol. Our motto is first, do no harm. But harm is relative. Is it harmful to let a slaver continue their trade? Is it harmful to allow a disease to spread because stopping it requires harsh measures? You'll face these questions every day. How do you handle it? Asked the young woman in front. The weight of those decisions. Sarah smiled, the expression carrying years of hard-won wisdom. You remember why you became a healer in the first place. You hold onto the faces of those you've saved. You lean on your teammates when the burden gets too heavy. And you never, ever forget that with great knowledge comes great responsibility. She gestured to the academy around them. This place will teach you to be weapons, but you must choose to remain healers. We'll show you how to take lives, but you must remember that every life has value. We'll give you power over biology itself, but you must use it with wisdom and restraint. The galaxy calls us medical warriors, she continued. But I prefer to think of us as warrior healers. The healing always comes first. The warrior part is just a tool we use when healing alone isn't enough. A chime indicated the end of the session. As students began filing out, many stopped to shake Sarah's hand or ask questions. She answered each one patiently, seeing herself in their eager, frightened faces. Later, Sarah stood on the Academy's observation deck with Thrax and Admiral Wong, who had retired to help run the institution. They watched as students from 100 worlds mingled in the courtyards below, former enemies learning together. Think we're making a difference? Wong asked. Look at them, Sarah replied. Korthani learning beside their former victims. Slavers' children studying to become healers. Species that had never cooperated, now sharing knowledge. Yes, we're making a difference. The threats are evolving, Thrax warned. Criminal organizations are recruiting rogue medical warfare specialists. Some governments want to weaponize our techniques for conquest rather than defense. Sarah nodded. That's why we're here. To train the next generation to be better than us. To give them the tools and wisdom to face whatever comes next. She thought back to that day on the Korthani ship when she had been just a scared nurse with a medical kit and a desperate plan. She couldn't have imagined it would lead to this, a revolution that reshaped the galaxy, an academy that turned healers into protectors, a legacy that would outlive them all. You know what the best part is? Sarah said, we've proven that humans aren't special because we're strong or fast or tough. We're special because we care, because we'll stand up for others even when it costs us, because we turn our knowledge into power and our power into protection. As the sun set over the academy, casting long shadows across the courtyards, Sarah felt a sense of completion. The scared nurse who had defeated the Corthani was gone, replaced by a teacher, a leader, a symbol. But the core of who she was remained unchanged. She was a healer. She saved lives. And sometimes to save lives, she had to be willing to do terrible things to terrible beings. It was a burden she had chosen to bear so others wouldn't have to. The galaxy had learned that humans weren't helpless. They had learned that healers could be the deadliest warriors. But most importantly, they had learned that compassion, knowledge, and determination could overcome any amount of brute force. As new threats emerged and new challenges arose, the graduates of the Galactic Medical Academy would be ready. They would carry syringes and scalpels instead of swords and guns. They would fight with chemistry and biology instead of bullets and bombs. They would be healers first and warriors second. And the galaxy would be safer for it. Sarah Chun had struck the first blow against those who thought humans were helpless. Now, thousands of others would continue that fight, armed with medical knowledge and an unshakable belief that the weak deserve protection from strong. The revolution that began with a single nurse and a medical kit had become a movement that spanned the stars. And it all started because the alien elite thought she was helpless. They had never been more wrong.